Today I pick the winner of each Power 5 conference. I'm Nathan Gustafson, and this is Clutch Time. Alright, to start the show today, we will do the Pac-12 first, and I'll start with my prediction for Conference Player of the Year, and that's Justin Herbert, quarterback of Oregon. I think he is a phenomenal football player. I think that he should be the number one overall pick in next year's NFL draft. He is an outstanding player, and I don't see a whole lot of competition for him for this honor. I could see Jacob Eason sort of competing with him, but I think that Herbert runs away with the Pac-12 Player of the Year. For the North Division winner, however, I will not be taking Herbert's Oregon Ducks. I will be taking the Stanford Cardinal to take away that honor. For two reasons. One, I think there's a big three in the Pac-12. That's Oregon, Washington, and Stanford. Stanford plays both the other two really good teams at home, which is a huge edge for them this year. In addition, they duck Utah, who I think is probably the fourth best team in the Pac-12, altogether on their schedule. I think by avoiding Utah, getting the other two big games both at home is a huge edge for Stanford, and because of those reasons, I have them winning the North Division. For the South Division, I'm actually not going to take Utah, although I think they're the best team. They're going to have to play at USC in a game in which I think JT Daniels is going to have to show up because USC will have to pass in that game. Utah's front seven is outstanding. They have very good athletes at both on their defensive line and at linebacker. And I do think that JT Daniels will be able to lead them to victory over Utah at home. And I think that the rest of the Pac-12 South is very weak, so I think it'll be easy for USC to come out on top of the South Division. That sets up a conference title game between Stanford and USC. Last year, Stanford beat USC 17-3. While I do think USC will certainly put up a better fight this year than they did last, I believe that Stanford will come out on top of the Pac-12 title game and that they will be Pac-12 champions this year. While that may be true, I do not see them making the playoff. They have matchups outside of the conference with Notre Dame and Central Florida. They do still have to play Washington, Washington State, and Oregon. And between having 5 to 6 legitimate games on their schedule, it's hard for me to see them losing less than 2 games. And I think because they'll be at least a 2-loss team, even though I'm picking them to win the conference, I can't see them making the playoff this season. That brings me to the Atlantic Crappy Conference, the Atlantic Coastal Conference, where Clemson is a mile ahead of the rest of what is a really bad conference. There's one insanely good team and 11 bad teams in this conference. The Conference Player of the Year will be Trevor Lawrence by about a mile. The Atlantic Division winner will be Clemson because they will not lose a game until they make the playoff. The Coastal Division winner doesn't really matter because whoever it is going to get blown out of the water by Clemson. I'm going to pick the Hurricanes of Miami just because I would like to see them be good again. They're sort of a fun team when they're good. They have such a rich history, and I think that it's good for college football if they're competitive again. But while that may be true, Clemson is just going to stomp all over this conference that has no other good teams like they do every year. So obviously my conference winner prediction is Clemson, and I am picking them to be the 1 seed in the college football playoff this year. To be honest, they shouldn't even have any games within 14 points, roughly 2 touchdowns in their first 12 games of the season. That will bring me to my SEC predictions. I think the SEC will be very competitive this year. My Conference Player of the Year is Tua Tagovailoa. I think that he's going to have another phenomenal year like he did last. The difference being that I don't see any other Kyler Murrays coming in to swoop the award from him. He was just phenomenal last year. It wasn't even close in how much he won Conference Player of the Year by. The East Division winner, I think, is much easier to pick this year than the West. Usually it's not that way. I do think that Georgia is far and above Florida, South Carolina, and the rest of the East Division of the conference. I think that Georgia will likely breeze their way to the SEC title game. Now, the West is a little bit different because I am picking Alabama to win it. I would not put anything past LSU to compete with them. They returned Grant Delpit and Rashard Lawrence, 2 absolute beasts on defense, while Alabama lost the majority of their defensive players. But Alabama is simply returning too much on offense with Jerry Jeudy and Tua, and I think that Alabama will beat LSU. They also get the big advantage of playing them at home, and for those reasons I like Alabama. But in the conference title game, I like Georgia to beat Alabama, and unlike other years where Alabama was able to lose the conference title game and still get in the playoff like they did, I believe 2 years ago when they won the national title, I don't believe that's going to happen again, because I believe that Alabama will lose another game in the regular season, and I don't think a 2-loss Alabama team can get into the playoff the way a 1-loss Alabama team can. They have to play LSU, Texas A&M, and Auburn, who are 3 legitimate contenders, 3 legitimate teams that have mass amounts of talent, and they have to play all 3 in the regular season. I believe that in one of those 3 games, Alabama will lose, along with a conference title game against Georgia. So for the first time in a long time, I'm predicting that Alabama will fall short of making the college football playoff. And the only playoff team coming out of the SEC this year will be Georgia. All right, now for my Big Ten predictions for Conference Player of the Year, I have Justin Fields. This kid is going to be really good. I am really good. He is electrifying. He has a cannon. He is fast. He is going to be outstanding for Ohio State this year. He is the reason that my East Division winner for that conference is indeed Ohio State. A lot of this stuff about Shea Patterson coming back for another year, and this is the year that Michigan puts it together, and I just don't see it. I don't see any talent on their offense. I think that Shea Patterson is the single most overrated player in college football. I don't think he's very good at all. They lose Devin Bush and Rashawn Gary, 2 huge pieces on their defense, and it leaves me quite confused as to why so many people think that this is the year Michigan's going to overcome it. Possibly because Urban Meyer left, I suppose, but I don't blame Jim Harbaugh for the losses the last couple of years. I think Jim Harbaugh is an outstanding coach. I think Ohio State beat Michigan because they have an abundantly bigger pool of talent on their team, that they have better players at each and every level, and you could just see them athletically dominating Michigan last year. And I think that despite losing Paris Campbell and Dwayne Haskins, it's going to be more of the same this year, because I think that Haskins was a symptom of a really good offense. I don't buy him completely, and I think that Justin Fields is going to come in and put up just as good, if not better, numbers. Now, the West Division is going to be close. I don't think that Northwestern is going to come back and have another great year like they had last year. I believe it's going to come down to Wisconsin and Iowa, and I'm picking Wisconsin, led by All-American running back Jonathan Taylor. I think that they're going to come out and win a very weak West Division of this conference. This has been a lot of years in a row where the best teams are kind of in the East with Ohio State, Michigan State, and Penn State. It's sort of like the Pac-12 with Washington State, Oregon, and Stanford. I wish these conferences were more balanced, that there were more good teams on each side. But certainly in the West, the weak West of the Big Ten, I'm picking Wisconsin this year. The conference winner, though, whether it's Ohio State or Michigan that comes out of the East, I'm picking Ohio State, and I think that they'll demolish Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game. I think that Ohio State will lose somewhere, one game, just because the Big Ten's a pretty good conference, especially on that side of it. It's pretty complete. They have too many tough games to not lose somewhere. I can't see them being undefeated, but I do think they'll be a 1-loss team, and I think they'll be a 1-loss team that gets into the playoff, along with, so far, Clemson and Georgia I've picked. That's 3 of 4 teams, which leads us into our Big 12 predictions. For Conference Player of the Year, I have Sam Ehlinger of Texas. Unlike the other conferences that have 12 teams, they don't have a conference title game that's only 10 teams. For that reason, I'm picking Texas to win the conference. I think they're better than Oklahoma this year. I think they'll come out and lose Week 1 to LSU. From that point on, I don't see this Texas game losing another game the rest of the season. I love their wide receiver, Colin Johnson. He is outstanding. He's an incredible football player, great jump ball receiver. I think he comes out as a senior next year, puts up outstanding numbers his third year playing with Sam Ehlinger. They also have that really fast, really good running back. I think his name's Keontae Ingram. And I think that they come out and beat the Jalen Hurts-led Oklahoma Sooners, and I think that they take this conference this year. And I think because they'll be a 1-loss team after that loss to LSU, I don't see them losing any conference games this year. I think they rise above their conference, and I think that they make it into the playoff as that 4th playoff team as a 1-loss team. And that is what I have as the 4 playoff teams: Texas, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia. The big upset being Alabama not making it this year because the SEC West is too stacked, and I think that they will lose to Georgia in an SEC title game. Make sure you tune into our next episode where I make my college football playoff predictions, and I'll let you know who I think is going to win the Heisman this year. Thanks for watching.